Hi, my name is Nicole Faye Golden, and I'm the host of Scar Stories podcast. We all walk through seasons of brokenness, and it's so easy to buy into the lies that we're alone, forgotten, weak, and too far gone. But here's what I want you to know. We all have scars, and so we all have stories. I'm really hoping these interviews resonate with you and that you walk away knowing that you aren't alone, you're never forgotten, you are strong enough, and there are always second chances. Thanks so much for tuning in, and welcome to Scar Stories. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Scar Stories. My name is Nicole Golden. I'm your host, and I'm so glad that you guys are here. I have been loving these interviews over the past couple of weeks, and I have a brand new friend here that I can't wait to introduce you to. Her name is Jessie Jean. And I don't know, Jessie, how I even found you on Instagram. Somehow I stumbled across your socials, and I immediately fell in love. She is so open and honest about body image issues, food issues, sex, the whole nine yards. And we're going to get into all of it in this next hour. So we're going to talk fast and move along and maybe even get you on another time because I have so much I want to ask. But welcome, Jessie. So glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, Nicole.
Oh, 100%. So let's just dive right in. So I know, and I say this all the time on my podcast that a lot of times I, stalk people on their socials, but I don't actually end up meeting them and having a conversation until they get on the podcast, which is kind of fun. So from the research and stuff that I've done on your socials, which sounds weird now, don't report me in order. You were in all sorts of like body competitions or bikini competitions or something, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Yep. I did bodybuilding for a number of years.
Okay. Wild. So tell me about that journey, and I've always been, so you're not the only person I've run into that was bodybuilding, but also having like issues with eating, like eating disorders and some people say disordered eating, they say it all different ways, but you're not the only person I've talked to about it. And that's always so fascinating to me because a lot of times when you think of disordered eating, you think someone who's really thin has no muscles and, so that's such an interesting thing to me. But tell me about that journey for you. And did the disordered binging start before that, during that, after that? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first I would say that I would dare to guess probably 9 out of 10 bodybuilding competitors struggle with disordered eating, body dysmorphia, eating disorders. So very few can actually pursue the sport. It is a sport and not have it take a huge toll on their mental and physical health. It is something that it's an elite sport. And in order to do it successfully, you just have to be, I think, wired a certain way mentally. And if you can't, it doesn't mean you're weak or you're broken. It's not natural for our body to go through such stress. And so, it's pretty sad. And a lot of competitors don't even realize they have eating disorders. They just chalk it up to being super disciplined and it's just part of the sport, but they're really struggling with body dysmorphia. They never feel good enough. They're struggling with what they see in the mirror. They're struggling with food. They're, restricting and doing these, 12, 16, 20 week long preps and then spiraling out of control immediately after the show. And don't know how to live, how to eat outside of a very regimented plan. And so it almost becomes a self-imposed prison that they create for themselves. And so I just got sucked into that. I was struggling with food well before I started competing.
Okay.
And when I found fitness, it was almost like, this could be my way to finally heal, because if I'm disciplined enough to control my food, get the body I want, I'll be confident and that'll solve my struggles with food and body. And sure enough, it only exacerbated the problem, and the binging, the overeating, and the restrict cycles magnified when I started competing, because it's just a more intense form of dieting. It's more restrictive. It's, the hours that you're putting in the gym every day. There was a time where I would go to the gym twice a day. I was probably in the gym 4 hours a day.
Wow.
And, at my lowest was eating, barely 1,000 calories and working out that hard. So, my metabolism got all messed up. I had brain fog. My hair was falling out. I had no sex drive. leading up to one of my first competitions, I was so emaciated that I had to walk along the side of the wall at the airport to brace myself so I wouldn't pass out as I was going from gate to gate. And I remember at that time, I was so disordered in my thinking around food that I didn't even think gum was allowed, that 1 calorie that you get from chewing gum. And I remember I quote unquote broke in the airport and I had a piece of gum. And I remember feeling so guilty for chewing a piece of gum. So that's kind of the extreme that I got to. And yeah, that was a number of years that I did that. Fortunately, I got a little bit better at the sport and I found mentors and more science-backed coaches and trainers who were supportive in helping me understand how to pursue bodybuilding in a little bit healthier a way.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it was still really unhealthy for me. And it was still, it was just perpetuating the cycles that I was in.
Yeah. So what was the breaking point? Are you out of bodybuilding? And then, was it, you had to get out of that to break the cycle? What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, I had to, I realized that if I wanted to live a life where I was not constantly thinking about food and constantly concerned with how I looked and, the shape of my body, and I wasn't constantly having to count calories or count macros, I had to move outside of a sport that forces you to constantly focus on that.
Yeah.
And I was terrified, but I was also exhausted. I was so sick and tired of spending so much time in the gym. I was so tired of weighing, tracking, and measuring every gram of protein, carb, and fat that went in my body. It came to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I was just worn out. And I slowly started to transition out. And it went from, I actually got sick following one of my last competitions. And I now look at it as a blessing in disguise because I got sick and I couldn't work out as hard as I was. And I was sick for about a month. And so I was just kind of laid up, and that period of rest was so healing for me in so many ways, because I used to struggle to take one day off from the gym. I felt so much guilt and shame. And when I was forced to rest, I felt my energy levels coming back. I just felt healthier. I felt better. I was driving my body into the ground with how hard I was pushing it. And so I started to, and I was tired, like I said, tired of weighing, tracking, measuring every gram of protein, carb, and fat. And so I started to slowly not count my calories and count my macros and try to move into intuitive eating. But it was definitely a really messy process of feeling like I was spiraling out of control, and all these off limits foods that I had, they had such a magic, such an allure to them. So anytime I would eat them, I would go crazy. And I thought, I can never do this whole intuitive eating thing where I listen to my body, because, if I listen to my body, I'd be elbow deep in a tub of ice cream every night. Like this just isn't going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But eventually, over time, as I learned some different brain-based techniques to reprogram my relationship with food, I really started to find my way out of those cycles, out of the feelings of impulsiveness to binge or overeat, and was able to, leave a little bit of food on my plate. I would lose interest when I was physically full instead of just continuing to eat and eat and eat. And those were huge wins that people who struggle with food understand, like the ability to have junk food in your house and not go crazy on it, the ability to have some ice cream and just stays at a little bowl. It doesn't turn into a full-blown binge, or to be able to feel physically full and not want to continue eating, and wake up in the morning and not think about food first thing in the morning, or to constantly be stressing about your weight and your body and stepping on the scale. Like all of those things slowly started to become my reality as I pursued like behavior modification and mental reprogramming. And that was a process, but it was one that I'm so glad that I pursued, because staying in the bodybuilding world and continuing what I was continuing was just, it was life sucking. It took so much from me, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my life giving so much of myself to the way I looked.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there something like, because you said your relationship with food was not good even before the bodybuilding. So was there something that had happened to you, when you were younger that just kind of pushed you in this direction of being obsessed with your body and what you ate and how you looked? Or, I think for all of us there's this obsession or concern for how we look, but for you it seemed like it kind of went, you know, one step even further. So was there something that had happened when you were younger, or was it just something that was just gradual for you?
I think it was a gradual process. For
Yeah.
me, it started, my mom growing up really struggled with alcohol,
Okay.
and I never felt like I was in control of that situation. And
Mhm.
so finding something I could control, my
Yeah.
food intake, felt attractive to me.
Mhm.
And I was also in cheerleading and gymnastics. And I was naturally a pretty petite girl. And I was the top girl. They were throwing me in the air. And as I aged, as any individual does, as they're growing up, they grow, they gain weight. And I saw it as a personal failure that I was no longer,
Mhm.
the girl on the top of the stunts. And there were certain things that like my role in that world was changing. And I felt like it was my fault.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I just started to see the answer as needing to control food. I was also a really big perfectionist. And so that perfectionism translated into every area of my life.
Mhm.
I was in athletics, I was in advanced academics, I was doing student government, I was volunteering, I was doing everything I could to try and get scholarships to go to college because my parents didn't have the money to send me. And so
Yeah.
I was just putting so much effort into excelling that from the time I was a freshman in high school, I started sleeping like maybe 4 or 5 hours a night, because I was just committed to being the best at everything I did. So I would
Yeah.
study all the way into the late hours of the night. I would get up early and I would go to school to work out, with the sports team so I could keep
Mm.
in shape for my sport. And it was just this obsession of mine. And so I started to obviously need caffeine to keep me up, but I also needed, other energy sources. So I just started to turn to food to give me fuel because I wasn't sleeping. And my body started to change. One, I was growing, and one, I just wasn't sleeping and I was just eating instead for energy. And when I noticed that happening, that's when I started to try all these different things to reverse what was happening. And in that process of trying to control food really started to control me. And I
Yeah.
started to obsess over it and spiral out of control. And it was very shameful. I felt like I was the only one on planet Earth that was,
Mhm.
doing these weird things that I was doing with food.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I just and I do wonder too, with your mom's struggle with alcohol and other things, even trying to find your worth in the perfectionism and trying to find your worth and, look how good I am, look at all the things I can do, so now you also share on there that you got breast implants when you were younger, correct? I mean, you weren't very
Yeah.
old when you got them. How old were you when you got those?
No, I was 23.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yes, I got the implants at following my first competition, my first bodybuilding bikini competition. The girl who I got second place, I was so excited to get second place. But the reason that the judges told me I didn't get first place in that competition was because my upper body wasn't symmetrical with my lower body. And the girl who got first place had implants. And I'm like,
Okay.
that's what they mean. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
my upper body. And when you're so lean, you lose all breast tissue.
Yeah.
So I thought, in order for me to get anywhere in bodybuilding, I need to get implants. And so I immediately 6 months later was, going to get implants. And yeah, that's kind of what pushed me into it. I also will say that growing up, I didn't start my period until, well, they had to induce my period
Wow.
because I didn't start it until I was like 20 years old.
Was that
And
because of all the stress your body was under? Okay.
I think so. Yeah. I think it was a lot of stress. I think probably, a little post-traumatic stress disorder from the situation I grew up in.
Mhm.
And I was just putting myself through so much. So I think that's really what contributed to it. But as a result, my breast development was interesting. They were underdeveloped.
Okay.
They were asymmetrical, and it was just like a child who never fully developed. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I was really, really insecure. So that's why I decided to go and get implants.
And did it help with the?
Yeah, it did. It really did. I was more confident for quite a while. I felt good. I felt much better about it.
Yeah.
Um, and so when people say, now that I've gotten them out,
Yes. We're
people
gonna get
say,
to that.
do you
Yeah.
regret, do you
Yeah.
regret getting them? And, I don't regret any part of my life because I
Mhm.
feel like it's all made me who I am.
Yep.
Knowing what I know now, I probably would have pursued things a little bit differently, but, it did boost my confidence for quite a while. And
Yeah.
that felt good.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I think I saw that you met your husband in the fitness world, right? Did you guys meet at a competition?
No, we actually met at the gym.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, he was working out.
Is this while you were in the middle of competing or after?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was in the middle of
Okay.
my competing days. He was
Okay.
at the squat rack, and I put my stuff down on the squat rack next to him, and I, was just trying to save it. I went into the bathroom and I came back, and he was like, "People were trying to take your rack. I saved it for you." And I'm like, "Thanks so much." And that's just where it started.
And then the rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is
So,
history.
so what now? um, Talk to me about that journey. Like, and I was like just scrolling through your social media before we got on here, and you shared a picture of you and Hung sitting in a room in your house, and you talked about all the, hundreds of hours of marriage therapy y'all had in that room. And my husband and I have had quite a bit of marriage therapy. I feel like every good marriage is built on hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars of therapy. Amen. So
Yeah, right.
as you were coming out of that world, your relationship with food is changing, your body's changing, and then we're going to talk about this in a second, but just in this past year, you got your breast implants removed.
Yep.
And so talk to me about, did all of those changes affect your relationship with Hung? And then did it affect your security in your relationship with Hung? Like, because you met him with your body looking one way. If we can just, I think we can just speak really honestly. You met him
Yeah.
with your body looking one way, and now your
Yep.
body looks different. And so, what was that like for you emotionally? What was that like for him emotionally? Talk to me a little bit about your marriage as you're going through all of this transformation.
Yeah, totally. So, the one thing I will say about Hung is he has never, I don't think there's ever been one time he's made me feel insecure in my
Mm,
body, no matter
mm,
what I've been going through. So really, really do appreciate him for that. And we've both got our issues, and he's got, he deals with anger and a temper. But he always fights fair.
mm,
He's never called me names. He's never poked up any of my insecurities, not once. And
mm,
so, he's actually taught me a lot about fighting fair.
mm.
And, so as my body was changing, I was definitely feeling insecure about it. But it was never, it was never coming from him. I was just insecure in gaining weight following the competition. And I definitely was nervous, leading up to getting my implants removed just a few months ago. I was nervous because he met me with these big boobs, and now they're going to go away. And my surgeon, what were they? 400 one was 400 cc's and the other was 450 because they were asymmetrical. So surgeon was trying to balance them out. And my surgeon that I went to, we flew to California to go to this surgeon who just does explants. So it's all he does, and it's all he's done for years. And so he really under promised and over delivered, which I'm grateful for. He was like, look, you're 450 cc's, like you're going to be substantially different size. Like those are large implants. And he was like, and there's going to be a lot of, excess skin. You've got really stretchy skin. So, that's, we're going to do the best we can to make it look as good as we can. But he was like, this fullness that you have up top on the top of your breast right now, that's not going to be there. He said, natural boobs don't have that fullness. Like when you grab your boobs and you push them up, they don't have that. Even when we do a lift, natural boobs aren't going to create that look. And so yeah, I was really, really nervous about that, but went through with the surgery and got them out and was really pleasantly surprised with how they looked and how much better I felt. My neck felt. I was constantly dealing with neck and back pain, and I thought it was from working at the computer all day, but I really think it was just how heavy my implants were, just weighing on my neck all the time. But yeah, as my body was changing, there's been so many different moments where I've been triggered to focus on it and self-objectify. But through the work that I've done in my own healing journey, the work that I teach the clients that I work with, it's really about building body image resilience. So as I've shared openly on my social media, I was nervous about how I'd look after my surgery. I've also been dealing with this really annoying rash on my face for 7 months now, still dealing with it. And I committed a couple months ago to stop putting makeup on it. I thought, if I'm going to ever heal this thing, I have to let it breathe. I got to let it do its thing. And so that was another step, I feel like, in my body image resilience journey of feeling like I'm worthy to be seen without makeup on my face and this full blown rash. Sometimes it's really irritated and flared. And, it's amazing when we choose to believe in our worth, despite our flaws or despite the things that make us feel insecure. It's really quite powerful. How much resilience we build and how, it's like I would get so nervous initially when I first stopped wearing makeup a few months ago. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go out. I don't want to go to the store. I don't want people to see me. And then eventually it was just like, it's just like, it is what it is. And nobody says anything. Nobody does anything. You go out and it's like, okay, you have cellulite on your legs. Nobody cares. Nobody's thinking about it. People just, they might notice it and have a thought for 2 seconds. And then they're thinking about themselves and their own insecurities. So, it's been such a journey for me to make peace with an ever-changing body. And, as I get older, I notice a bunch of other things, like my skin isn't as firm, wrinkles are coming, it's just like everything starts to change and we're not escaping it. So we might as well learn how to make peace with our ever-changing body. And that's, I've had so many seasons where my body has undergone so much change, and our bodies are not supposed to be we're not supposed to fit into the same clothes we fit into when we were 18. Like that's just not realistic. So many of us are hoping for our adolescent bodies, and that's not how it works. And we have to start making peace with the fact that our bodies are going to continue to change. And I think the best way to do that is to start to see ourselves as more than a body. We need to stop self-objectifying, because our bodies are not ornaments, they're instruments. And so it's like when we can see more than our body, we start to value our life and value ourselves beyond our body. And so I think a lot of my self-worth has transitioned from what do I look like to who am I and what makes my life so rich. And really shifting that focus has been so transformational, because I'm not so caught up on a day-to-day basis in, what my hair looks like, or if I'm fitting into this outfit I want to fit into, or how my skin is doing. It's like, some days it gets me. Last night I was telling Hung, I'm like, I'm so sick of this stupid rash on my face. Like, I don't know what to do. And I've gone through so much testing. We've spent probably $10,000 at this point through all different tests. And it's like, we don't know what's going on in my body. And so it's definitely been a process, but along the way, with how it's impacted our marriage, I think Hung does such a fantastic job of, regardless of what I look like, he desires me. And I think, for me, it's like getting caught up in my own head of feeling undesirable. And then I put up walls, but realizing that he's always wanting to be with me, he always desires me, and just letting that love in. I think a lot of us are blocking ourselves from letting the love in, because of how insecure we feel when it's there. Our partners or the people in our lives, they want to love us, but our insecurities are shielding us. So
I resonated with so much that you said, and I love the body image resilience, line that you shared. And for me, I was always very overweight in middle school and high school. And, I mean, not very overweight, but I was chubby. And, people that were closest to me would make fun of me because they just thought, it was just, I think they thought it was all good fun, and I would laugh back because I was so embarrassed. But I mean, we would even be at dinners with other people, and I'd ask for rolls, and my friend would be like, "You don't need any more rolls," and he'd say that to me in front of, like, referring to the rolls in my stomach and stuff. And so I, for the longest time, just thought my whole life I was going to be chunky. And then, um, right after my husband Brian and I got married, I got diagnosed with anxiety and depression and borderline personality disorder, and felt so out of control with that. A similar thing, just started really counting my calories, working out, and lost about, I don't really know what I weighed before I started losing weight, but I got down to like skin and bones, and and then since that point and now, I've had 4 children. My body has changed. I think now I'm more focused on wanting to be healthy, but still I've had this kind of touch and go relationship with food. I'm a big sweets person. And you're talking about having junk food in the house and being controlled. I'm not good at that yet, but it's been funny because this past year I finally realized, okay, I can work out to unglue in the face, and I can restrict my calories and all of those things. But I don't have a good relationship with food. And so one of my good friends is a health coach. And so she and I have been working together over, and I think that's kind of how even I ventured over to your page. Cause I think more and more, there's more women like you speaking out openly about being comfortable in our bodies and getting used to the roles and the skin. There's skin, and just appreciating our bodies for who they are. And what you said, not just for what we do, but how did you say it? It's not what I am. You said something about my body isn't
an ornament. It's
yes,
an
it's an
instrument.
instrument. And then you said something else. It's like, I'm not so focused on what I look like, but who I am or what I do or something. What did you say?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah. I said, shifting the perspective of shifting all of my energy
Yeah.
from what I look like into who I am, what I
Yes.
value
Yes.
that's what's been so transformational for me.
And I think too, one of the things I appreciate about you is I feel like you're fair. Like you and I talked about this. I've never admitted this on the podcast, but hey, why not? Like I got a mommy makeover about a year and a half ago.
Mhm.
After having 4 kids, I had 3 boys. I had my daughter and then 3 boys. And one of the reasons why we pursued it was because after my last son, my final, my number 4 and no more, the doctor came in and was like, you are going to have surgery. I had so much excess skin.
Mm.
And then I had terrible diastasis recti. I had like, you could stick 4 fingers between my abdominal wall. And then also like my boobs were like a flappy little piece of skin, And so we went in and got the whole 9 yards done. And I've seen, and what I appreciate about you is I feel like you're fair. Cause I remember reading a lot of the posts where you're like, I'm not saying, cause I saw some people were coming at you and you're like, I'm not saying not to get it done. You were talking about your journey. And I think that's one reason why I've just been so drawn to you. And even with your no makeup journey and things, like, as we're talking, like you don't have any, I'm full faced, but I think we need more voices like yours in this particular field saying, listen, it's not all or nothing, but it's finding, I think, the reason behind what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? Am I right on that?
Yeah, absolutely. If my skin could handle it, I would have a full face of makeup right now. I
Yeah.
enjoy putting makeup on.
Yeah.
I enjoy getting done up, those things. And, I think what's so important is to recognize that it's okay for us to all be different, and we don't have to pass judgment. We don't have to pass judgment on our friends or the people in our communities or our circles or our families that really like to get dressed up and put makeup on and spend a lot of money on their hair and clothes and whatever, if that's not who you are. And also,
Yes.
likewise, if that's who you are, you don't need to pass judgment on those who don't like to do those things, those who prefer an all natural approach to the way that they look. That's totally okay. And I think, our culture gets so easily offended by our differences instead of recognizing that somebody else's reality can be so true for them, and it doesn't have to be a threat to your own reality. And so, I'm definitely, I don't think there's a one size fits all for anything. And I'm not against plastic surgery because I got my implants out. I got them out because I think they were contributing to making me sick. And that doesn't happen for everybody when they get implants, but there's a lot of people it does happen for. And so I think I wanted to share my story because I wanted people to hear this.
Yeah.
And so, there's I think it's, yeah, that line needs to be very clear that, if you choose to get plastic surgery or to, do a mommy makeover, get Botox, get things done,
Yeah.
hey, feel good about that and do you and do it
Yeah.
unapologetically. And if people pass judgment, that's okay. That's on them. I
Yep.
think when we walk in our own unshakable confidence of what it
Mhm.
means for us to feel alive and to feel good and to feel confident,
Yeah.
I think that's what matters most. So I have friends who, I spend money on, certain aspects. Like I spend a lot of money on my hair. I spend money on, usually when I haven't been dealing with a skin issue, I put makeup on, my fake eyelashes, the whole nine yards.
Yeah.
And then I have friends who just don't do that.
Yeah.
Um, I have friends who are, I have friends who are a lot more bougie, if you will, than I am, who spend a lot of money on designer clothes. And
Yeah.
I don't care to spend that kind of money on clothing. And then I have friends who would never, glue on fake eyelashes or wear the amount of makeup that I want to wear sometimes. And to be able to have people on both ends of the spectrum and respect that,
Yeah.
there's different, different preferences, that's okay. So,
Yeah.
for me, it's been a journey of, there's been certain seasons where I look back and I've, look always very put together, and certain seasons where I'm super relaxed. And I think just figuring out what works for you and what feels good for you is what's
Mhm.
ultimately the most important.
And I think at the bottom of a lot of when we are casting the judgment and the insecurity is the shame, you know.
Yeah.
And I think just even shame at ourselves, like, am I enough? Am I enough because I'm not doing all of that? Am I enough because I am doing all of it? You
Right.
know, and because I'm doing all of it doesn't mean I feel like I'm not enough if I don't. I think it's all, and so just like what you said, like walking in our own confidence. I love it. So
Hmm.
before we move on to talking about
Yeah.
sex, which has been what I've been so excited to talk to you about,
Mm.
I jotted down your program is called Food Freedom Online Program.
Yes.
Is there a website? I know they can find you. I'm going to link your socials on here, but where can they find you online if they want to be
Yeah.
part of this?
Yeah, I think the best place to probably check out what I do is on my podcast, the Dear Body Podcast.
Okay.
Just checking that out. If you struggle with food, your relationship with food and your body, if you're stuck in the binge, emotional overeating, body image cycles, yeah, we love to come alongside women who are in those struggles. I went back to school to get my eating psychology
Mm,
certification,
wow.
and it's been super transformative, and it's been such an honor. We've worked with over 1,000 women in the last 3 years to help them reprogram their brain and how it functions around food and how they feel about their body, so they no longer even feel the impulse to binge or
Mhm.
overeat.
Mm.
We use different mental collaboration metacognition techniques. It's a very brain-based approach, our program. So yeah, it's been such an honor. And if you're struggling in your relationship with food, I say the best place to start, like I said, is just check out the podcast. I talk
Yeah.
all about binge eating, emotional eating, body image struggles, and how we can navigate our way out of those struggles. And then, of course, I talk about the course and what we do on the podcast, but you can check that out at www.foodfreedomonlineprogram.com slash
Love that.
FFM. Um, so yeah, that's where I
So
spend
good.
most of my time.
And you guys will just be so blessed even by just following her and her honesty
Mm.
and her journey. So let's switch gears real quickly because we only have a few minutes left, and let's talk about sex. All right. So
Yeah.
um one of the first posts I saw was like you with like sitting there with your skin, and then I think even you had one with the hung, messing with your skin. I was like, oh, I love this woman. Then you posted something about with a vibrator in it and talking about how the world like really likes to accept the professional woman, but they have a really hard time accepting the woman who enjoys pleasuring
Mhm.
herself and being pleasured. And I was like, oh my gosh, got to get to know her.
Mm.
Um, so one of the things that Jesse and I talked about before she hopped on is that we are both Jesus followers. And I know I've got a lot of listeners that aren't, and totes great. But I wanted to give you some background to this. And I asked her if she was familiar with the purity culture. And so for those of you who aren't, I'm going to give you a real quick rundown about what purity culture is and was. And is hopefully on its way dying out. But purity culture in the church, it was something that was basically taught that sex is awful, wicked, terrible, dirty, wrong. And then as soon as you get married, it's awesome and go and have it. But then a lot of it also hinged on pleasure was just for the man, and that you as a woman, and this was taught in the church, still is in some places, you as a woman need to doll up and make sure you're taking care of yourself, because if your husband has any kind of wandering eyes, that's on you because you have not kept yourself up and looking good. And then if your husband cheats, that's on you, because if the barn needs paint, paint it. And also you should be satisfying all of your husband's needs. It's very male domineering as far as sex is concerned. So I remember, because I had grown up in this world where if people had premarital sex, they were shamed. I remember this Bible college that I went to and attended. If you had sex in college, you were kicked out of the college. Um, and so, I mean, if you kissed someone, you were kicked out. I mean, it was ridiculous. And so I didn't have my first kiss until I was 23 years old. And I was a virgin when I got married, and our first probably year or two of sex as married couples, I didn't orgasm on like in sex. I thought sex was just for my husband. I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't until after I started doing reading and researching on what sex is. And then I will say in the past probably year and a half, through the pandemic, because like what else was there to do? My husband and I started really studying sex and how the church as a whole has gotten sex wrong. How I think a lot of times we think the Bible says certain things about sex that it doesn't. So let's just talk about sex for a little bit, Jesse, and tell me a little bit about your journey with sex and why you are one of the things you really put forth on your social media is getting comfortable pleasuring yourself. Why is that such a big deal to you?
Mm.
And I love it. Why is that such a big, because I remember masturbation too was something in purity culture. No one was to masturbate. It was sinful. It was wrong. Don't even think about masturbate. So
Mhm.
talk to me about your journey with sex now that I just set that up embarrassingly so.
No, it's good. I think having these conversations is super important
Yeah.
because so many people feel shame around this idea of sex, but it's a very human, very natural thing.
Mm,
And if we don't talk about it openly, how are we supposed to learn about it? If we
yes.
don't talk about how a woman has so many different buttons, if you will, in order to get off. A lot of women are just faking orgasms. They're faking enjoyment through sex because, this perspective that it's just about the man. I need to pretend to enjoy it, but you should
Mm,
enjoy it. But how
yes.
are you supposed to enjoy something unless you really learn about it? It's not like the movies where it's just this, and it can be, I suppose, but it's not usually where it just, is fireworks when, you just come together and know what to do.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there's no conversation around it. And yeah, the church does a pretty good job in a lot of ways. A lot of churches, I'm not saying all churches, but there's definitely a lot of churches who really push this idea. Quiet sex, quiet the talk around sex, and there's this underlying shame associated with
Mm,
it. And I think for me, one of my big passions is to break down taboo and stigmatizing topics because
yeah.
shame is, there's a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is I've done something wrong, and shame is I am wrong.
Mm,
And there's so much shame that people are carrying, and it's so heavy. And shame in the research is associated with addiction, eating disorders, depression. It's associated with a lot of these things. And so, if we can help individuals break down shame, I think we can help people feel a little bit more free. They can
yeah.
heal. They cannot turn to some of these self-sabotaging behaviors because when shame sets in, this idea that I am wrong, we're constantly at war with ourselves. And so we
Mm,
do things to numb out, we do things to distract ourselves. And those things tend to be self-sabotaging.
yeah.
It could be a sex addiction. It could be alcohol. It could be drugs. It could be a shopping addiction. It could be pornography. It could be, eating disorders, whatever it is. And so I'm just passionate about bringing up topics, sex just
Mm,
being one of those, bringing up topics that don't get a lot of conversation or open and honest conversation. And I feel like, you know, I I believe in, I love Jesus. And at the same time, I have this perspective that we're all humans trying to one, interpret the Bible. And I just don't believe shame is part of God's design for
Yeah.
us. And so I've had to do a lot of my own self-discovery and self-exploration. And I think my mom has always said it really well. She said, your journey is between you and God. And no matter what anybody else says, it's between you and him. So listen to your heart and what feels right. And so for me, it just became this thing where I felt so much shame around this idea of vibrators and self pleasure
Mhm.
and sex in general that I wanted to start talking about it because I knew I wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
And as I've ventured, more and more into marriage, I've released some of those things. It's felt very freeing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt so much shame for having premarital sex. I would have sex with my now husband and I would cry afterwards. And it would
Mm,
be this whole ordeal of how guilty and how ashamed I felt. And he
mm.
didn't really understand, but he was trying to support me. And the thing is, I think, if we don't spend on the topic of masturbation, if we don't spend time exploring our bodies and understanding what we like, how are we ever to communicate that with our partners?
Yeah.
And so if we want to live in a world where we continue to just hope it happens when we're having sex, hope it feels the way we want it to feel, I mean, I guess we can do that, or we can spend a little bit of time connecting with our bodies. And that's all it
Mm.
is. It's like, let me connect with this partner of mine, my own body,
Yeah. Yeah.
and get familiar with it so that I can communicate and so that I can have a healthy, sex life
Yeah.
and a pleasurable sex life.
Yeah.
And yeah, just, it's just a topic that I feel so many feel ashamed about, especially in, the religious world. And I think it needs to be talked about because, you know, that what's happening is we feel so much shame. So then go do things in secret. And then we
Yeah.
live with so much
Yes.
guilt. And we have all these things just festering in the dark corners of our mind.
Yeah.
So my number one value in life is freedom from food addiction, freedom from shame, freedom from insecurity, and yeah, freedom from having secrets. And
Yeah.
so I like to speak openly about these taboo topics. And it's been pretty amazing because in doing so, so many women have come forward and said, I struggle, or I've,
Mm.
never felt like I could purchase a vibrator. And I get it. There's a lot of, the world of sex has these dark sides, and there's a lot in the whole world of sex. There's these
Yeah.
beautiful parts, and then there's these parts that are dark and scary and perverted and
Yeah.
inappropriate. And we all have probably a different story when it comes to sex, whether it's been held in a safe container or whether we've been maybe violated in one way or another. Maybe the ideas we have about sex aren't very supportive for freedom and
Mm.
and pleasure.
Mm.
So I guess I'm trying to tell a story that feels
Yeah.
really empowering for women.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. And I think, again, as my husband and I have looked at scripture and what scripture actually says and teaches about sex, so much of what has been taught in the church isn't even in scripture when you start to look at it. And, one of the things he and I have been talking about and just trying to figure out is the whole idea of premarital sex and like, is it as wrong as the church has said? And is it as dirty? And I think I love what you said is there is a balance, right? There's a balance. You've even said it with food, with everything else. There's a balance in life. You can't go one way or you can't go the other way. But I think, even when you look at scripture, it's funny when you look at what a wedding or a marriage was, it was when two people had committed to each other. And then the marriage was actually having sex for the first time. Like that was the marriage. That was the, consummation of marriage. And so, even as I think logically, even about like you and Hung and having like you guys were obviously committed to each other and you weren't married yet, but there was a commitment there and there was a love there, and it wasn't just like you guys were just hitting and quitting it, not caring about the other person. There was an honest soul care there. And so I think even sometimes in that, like, yes, you carried a lot of shame and guilt that that and I don't know if this was you, but then a lot of people who have done that with their spouse before they're married, and then they get married, then the sex gets tainted in the marriage because all that guilt and shame gets brought into the marriage, and now you're undoing all of that as well. And so
Mhm.
and I think too, even for people like me, like it's dirty, it's dirty, it's dirty, it's dirty, it's dirty. Oh, you said I do. Okay, now go have fun on your honeymoon. And it's like,
Mhm.
I can't divorce the dirtiness that I've been taught. Like, and I hadn't even seen a penis, like I didn't know. I'm just going to be completely honest with you, Jesse. Like I didn't know how sex worked on my honeymoon.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like I didn't even know how it worked. He went into me the first time and it hurt like hell. And then I was like, "Oh, hope that was good for you because that was just not even remotely fun for me." And had nothing to do with him. Like he was very careful and very gentle, but and so and then when you get the idea that Christian sex is boring and all this other stuff. And so I think like experimentation, I think especially, once you do get married, I don't know that there's a whole lot off limits between you and your husband once you get married of things to try and enjoy. I don't know if you'd agree with me on that, but like
Mhm.
as long as there's open, safe communication. But I really appreciated you being honest about self-pleasuring because I think we've also lost track of the fact that we are, we are soul, spirit, bodies, but our bodies are beautiful and something to be enjoyed and something to not be afraid of. And I think even like the whole modesty thing with purity culture has created a lot of, taboo about different things. And so I just really appreciated you talking about just being comfortable in your body, embracing your body, and knowing your body. I think that's been so good for women, especially.
Yeah, I think I always get a little nervous whenever I do sex talks because I know that people will pass judgment. Not nervous of, what I'm going to talk about, but nervous of the perception that people will have because I know
Yeah.
where I came from. And so I always, I usually try and start with just a little warning. Hey, if you're not comfortable listening to this, that's totally okay. I
Yeah.
totally appreciate that. But this is what I'm going to be talking about on my story, or this is what I'm going to be sharing in the podcast because I get it. Some people just aren't in a place where they want to talk about it. It feels so shameful. It's like they're not ready to look into it and explore it. And I
Yeah.
hope to just offer a narrative that feels maybe safe. Like, hey, let's
Mhm.
just maybe talk about it. Let's see,
Yeah.
and what's really cool is you get to create your own sex story. Hey, you
Mhm.
don't you want, you want porn to be off limits, let it be off limits.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want X, Y, and Z to be off limits, have it be off limits if that
Yeah.
doesn't feel right for you and your partner, whatever it is. And I have things that, in our marriage, we have certain things that don't feel right for us that,
Yes.
I know some of my other friends and other couples that I know that feels right for them. And I'm like, okay, that's great. And I don't have
Yeah.
to be threatened by somebody else's preferences. It's
Mm.
just when I open myself up to be a little more open-minded, I get to learn.
Yes. Yes. 100%. And I think, especially when it comes to sex with your partner, it's what you said. It's communication and figuring out what feels safe for both of you. And when you have those conversations, yeah, that may not look the same for somebody else, but oh well, and it's the same thing we just talked about, even with body image and stuff. Like that shame, that insecurity doesn't need to creep up. Like you need to be confident enough in who you are and in your relationship and in your communication and your safety to be like, okay, we've agreed this is cool for us and we're okay with this. If it's not for you, that's great. I'm not going to judge you or pass judgment to you. Or if there's something that's not okay for us, but it's okay for you, like, yay.
Mhm.
But I think, yes, you're right. Like opening the conversation so that shame and guilt and judgment isn't a part of sex anymore, where we
Mhm.
can just learn and experiment and God created our bodies for pleasure. I think that's what people forget. God created the clitoris, like God created the orgasm, God created the penis and everything else. And so for us not to enjoy it and explore it and figure it out, like shame on us. That is something we
Mhm.
should be ashamed of, because our bodies were designed for pleasure. And so why are we not within obviously, like what you said, in the balance and not going where it's harmful? And I think those are the questions. One of the things like my husband and I have talked about is, when we go to talk to our kids, my oldest is 9, so we're talking to her about sex, but we're not necessarily to the point where I have to go too far yet. We're getting there though. I know that,
Mhm.
which is, yikes. But I think it's talking to what one of the questions we always say is like, what does love demand? So when it comes to the topic of sex, are you being loving to yourself and to someone else? And are you being safe to yourself and to someone else? I think those are the questions that are so important to ask in regards to sex. Do you agree or disagree, or would you add to that?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it definitely needs to be safe for the people involved.
Yeah.
And yeah, and deciding, what do I want this to feel like and encompass? And are we on the same page? I think communication is so important. And because we don't communicate about it, and talking about it is even shamed, like I said, we just go in with these ideas that it's just going to happen the way we have inside of our head, but we need to start talking about it. And that's why I try and talk about it openly. It's like, let's have these conversations.
Yeah, I love
Let's
it.
bring it out into the open.
That.
Yeah.
Well, Jesse, thank you so much for your honesty. Thank you for being on here. You guys make sure you follow her on social media and get her podcast. I'm going to link all of that to this, but and then as always, if you go to NicoleGolden.org, I have a resources page there. I'll have all of that there as well. So if you watch and listen and forget, it's all on my website. But we appreciate it, Jesse. And guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into Scar Stories podcast. We all need places where we can feel seen, be safe, find connection and resources. I would love to connect with you on social media at Nicole Faye Golden. I also have a website with a ton of resources and a free 7-day Praying Scared prayer journal at NicoleGolden.org. Thank you for tuning in. I'd love it if you shared this with your friends and if you left a rating and a comment. And I look forward to seeing you next time as we delve into mental health, parenting, family, and so many other issues with a lot of my friends. We'll see you soon.